Hello, my name is Laura Rogers, and this is my video submission for the Legal Aspects of Healthcare class for our final paper. So my paper topic was about the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act and how it relates to organ procurement organizations and a few cases where that act is challenged. So I'm going to go through the roles of the organ procurement organization, the role of the hospitals, how the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act came into play, a history of that, a timeline of organ donation, and go into some misconceptions about signing up to be an organ donor, how to sign up to be a donor, and then again some of the legal court cases that had to do with donation. So first of all, I know this is maybe a simple concept or just a simple statement, but death is inevitable. And when you're in a hospital setting, it is something that's going to occur. And something that, when that happens, that you have to consider is just end of life decisions. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made. And one of the options, potentially for someone who's passed away, is tissue, eye, or organ donation. And it's a hard concept to wrap your mind around as far as death is concerned, especially the death of a loved one, but it can add another chapter to the end of someone's life. And so the history of organ donation and how that came to be, obviously there is a need, and with death also there are illnesses and ailments that cause someone to be in need of an organ. And at some point in time, about the mid-90s, the government started to take into account that they had to do something to provide life-saving organs for those in need. In 1954, there was the very first kidney transplant. That was a living donor to a recipient. But in 1960, there became the first definition of brain death, and that's going to play a part into organ donation. I'll get into that in a little bit, but with that definition, eventually came down the pipe a need for criteria for determining brain death when it came to organ donation. And so that also came to be eventually after that. And then as all this was kind of unfolding, like I said, it was the mid-90s. After determining the definition of brain death and setting criteria and establishing brain death prognosis, there also was first formed the very first organ procurement organization, so an agency to handle the procurement of organs. And again, this is all just building up to the way it is structured now. Organ procurement organizations are those organizations that work to facilitate the donation side of the process. So there's organ donation and there's transplant, and they just play a vital role in working to make that process happen as smoothly as it can, in education of the public about organ donation and myths and misconceptions in tissue and eye, and then, like I said, community awareness. But all of this is carried out because of in 1984, the National Organ Transplant Act that was passed by Congress. It established the Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network, who oversees the United Network of Organ Sharing, and that's a database for organs that are people who are in need of an organ transplant. So that is, there's the OPTN, which is the Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network, and then the United Network of Organ Sharing. They work together to work with OPOs to find the matches for those people who are in need. And then the Organ Procurement Organization ties into that, carrying out CMS regulations. So that's the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, and then also the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So, we've learned in Dr. Fortenberry's class, there are these agencies that create policies that carry out government laws, so legislative laws. So that's where OPOs come into play. So all of these are working together with hospitals, and these hospitals that have to follow these Joint Commission, accreditation committees, CMS regulations, all in an effort to provide life-saving organs and tissues for those who are in need. So I'm going to get into a little bit about the need and the waiting list. There are approximately, as of March 2020, approximately 112,000 men, women, and children waiting on a transplant. And of those people, 20 people die each day waiting for that list. Since I work at an organ procurement organization, and since I've worked there, yes, the number of people who are donating is growing, but also the need is growing. So that isn't matched. It can't keep up with the need. And so that's all the more reason for people to know about donation and what it can do for those, should that be the case. So in 1968, all these organizations have been created. And then also in 1968, the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act was passed. And this act is what actually protects a decision of someone who decides to be an organ donor. And it is a law that creates first person authorization that gives an individual the right to make that decision for themselves. And no one else can revoke that, and no one else can change that unless they have verbalized or they have in writing or some sort of recording or what have you that says that's how they revoked it. But that original act, like I said, it created the donor registry. It created the anatomical gift that anyone could decide for themselves. Also made trafficking organs illegal, which is a common misconception about donation. So anyway, it was an incredible act that really set into motion the donor registry as we know it today. And there's been some amendments since then, but all that remains true, that it says that if those were this person's wishes, an OPO, Organ Procurement Organization, has the legal right to uphold that. So the only caveat to that is tissue donation. So if someone has signed up to be a donor on the donor registry, legally, an OPO can go to lengths to continue with that donation, but with tissue, that can typically be stopped. That I'll get asked a lot, can a family stop the donor registry? And for tissue, in a lot of cases, if they refuse to answer medical social history questions, that can stop the donor registry from taking effect. So the UAGA was created, the donor registry was created. Now, did that mean that everybody just went and signed up for the donor registry? No. There are obviously misconceptions about signing up on the donor registry, and not everybody wants to be a donor or believes that it's a good thing. Some of the common misconceptions about donation, one of the biggest ones I would say certainly is that I'll hear quite often that people believe that they won't be taken care of in the hospital setting, and that if someone knows they're a donor, that they're just going to let them die. And I would definitely say that is the number one misconception, just from working in the OPO world for 9 years. That's absolutely not the case. They will do everything that they have taken an oath to do, and will make heroic attempts to save that life. And really, donation is only something that comes into play after death in some way, shape, or form has been declared. So cardiac time of death or brain death, as I mentioned earlier. So unfortunately, I think a lot of TV and movies have fostered that misconception. Another one is that we'll hear is about religion doesn't support it. And in fact, of all the major religions in the United States, they all do support a positive statement, a very neutral statement about donation. So it is certainly something that is considered a donation is a final act of love and generosity. So I would say those are two of the biggest misconceptions just to touch on as far as objection to it or sign up the registry. So some of the cases that have been brought up about challenging the UAGA, there was an OPO in Ohio that had approached for donation on a patient who was already in the registry, but they're still going to have that donation conversation with the family. And they approached, and this individual was legally declared brain dead. He was on the donor registry. This was taken to, and this is again in Columbus, Ohio. It was along with the hospital where this patient was. This was taken to the Franklin County Probate Court, and the Common Pleas Judge, Guy Reese, heard the case and signed the order to proceed. And he stated that Ohio law bars anyone other than the donor from amending or revoking an organ donation decision. And based on those factors, the judge followed through with that case. Time is of the essence when it comes to organ donation. So a lot of these cases they can't take their time through the courts. Doesn't mean that doesn't happen. Let me get this one that I'm going to talk about. There was another case against the Arizona Organ Network that I found a family was challenging the organ donation case. Same scenario, legally registered. They were taking it to court. The judge did give them they gave them more time for the hospital for them to get another opinion. And in that time frame, in that scenario, the person was not an organ donor because the time frame was drug out to the point where that option was taken away, medically taken away. You only have so much time to maintain organs to be able to transplant them successfully. And so in that case, where they basically bought time in order for that to not happen. So then some other cases are in relation to tissue, where they file suit maybe for the wrongful removal of the eyes. In Tennessee, for example, it was Hens versus Baptist Memorial Hospital and Mid-South Eye Bank site restoration. The issue here in the appeals court was in regards to the UAGA, and the folks acted in what they call good faith, and they decided that the issue was a matter of law, and the court held that the eye bank had acted in good faith and went ahead with who they considered legal next of kin. Didn't get to this a while ago, but the UAGA also established a hierarchy of who can make decisions. And hospitals a lot of times will ask who legal next of kin, and they go by good faith on that information has been honest. And so this was a case where someone agreed to it, but who wasn't technically legal next of kin, and the legal next of kin came through from behind and said, no, this was the wrongful removal. We wouldn't have agreed to this. So there's lots of different scenarios. Those are just 3 cases where the UAGA is coming into play. At the end of the day, of course, I believe that organ donation is something that is a noble act, and that clearly saves lives, but also can mean so much to a family that's decided to donate. And, we don't often get to know when our last day on this planet is. And it is of my opinion that if it is untimely, that it's something that you've thought about, and that the people around you would know that's what you would want to do. And as I've said over these years, it's adding an extra chapter to your book, and where you get to be a hero in someone else's life. So I hope that clears some things up. I'm excited about the discussion. If anybody has any questions for me about organ donation, I will be more than happy to answer those. Thank you.